Morning, everyone. Welcome to the January 29th meeting of the Knoxville Regional Transportation Planning Organization. I'm Vice Chair Mayor Glenn Jacobs, but I will be filling in for Chair Mayor Frank today. I'm going to call this meeting to order. The first order of business is the determination of a quorum, so could we please call roll?
If you are serving as a proxy for someone when I call their name, if you will please let us know. Mayor Tanya Martin.
Megan Brooks, serving for Mayor Martin.
Mayor Tony Akins. Mayor Roland Bradshaw. Mayor Scott Burton. Troy Everett. Mayor Terry Frank. Mayor Warren Gooch. Mayor Jeff Harris.
Here.
Mayor Glenn Jacobs.
Here.
Mayor India Kincannon.
Here.
Vice Mayor Tommy Smith. Mayor Ed Mitchell.
Here, Don Walker for Mayor Ed Mitchell.
Commissioner Gina Oster. Commissioner Harold Pittner. Trustee Justin Biggs. Isaac Thorne. Mayor Larry Waters.
James Temple for Mayor Waters.
Mayor Andy White.
Brian Boone for Mayor White.
Mayor Ron Williams.
Here.
That's 10 present, sir.
So that is a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I guess, do we want to start with introductions on this side, please? And since you guys were not part of the roll call there.
Good morning, Matt Meservey, TDOT Planning Director.
Troy Everett, TDOT Long Range, or TDOT Planning, Region 1.
And I think everybody else was included in the roll call, correct? Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
We have Savannah Robertson on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. So are there any amendments to today's agenda that someone would like to put forth? Okay, seeing none.
Motion approved. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So the first order of business is to approve the meetings from the November 20th, 2004 Executive Board meeting. Do I hear a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
Is there any corrections, discussion concerning the minutes? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes and the meetings are approved. The next order of business is election of officers for this year, and I'm going to turn that over to Doug Burton, who is TPO staff.
All right, thank you very much. In your packet, there is a list of our previous chairs and vice chairs. The bylaws state that at the first meeting of the year, we're to visit the chair and vice chair. The bylaws say that the chair and vice chair can serve a 2-year term and then a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. And so Terry Frank, our chair, has fulfilled her term. She's done 2 2-year terms. And then our vice chair, Mayor Jacobs, has also fulfilled his vice chair obligation, 2 2-year terms. So we would need both a new chair and a new vice chair. You can see by the list that traditionally the vice chair will move up, but that's at the pleasure of this board. I guess we can take these separately, and the first would be for the chair, and we would entertain any motion. Typically have a caveat that the person needs to be here or we have some type of correspondence, so it's not always great to elect someone that's not here and they find out later. But I guess it's
Voluntold.
But is there any nominations for the chair?
Glenn Jacobs, please.
I'll second that.
Any other nominations? I don't know if I run this part of it, but I guess I can. The nomination is for Mayor Jacobs for chair. All in favor? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The next would be for vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
I'll just say that I'm willing to be nominated. If someone wishes to nominate me, I'd be glad to serve in that role.
Does anyone want to make that nomination official in a motion?
I will.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? If not, we will act on the motion and second. All in favor for Mayor Kincannon being vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, we have a vice chair. And I would just like to say, Mayor Frank, she served two years as a vice chair and then 4 years as the chair. And even though she's not here, she will remain on the board. But I would like the minutes to express our appreciation for her, 6 years of contributing and leadership, and she did a great job. So I'd like to express that to her. So other than that, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Doug. So moving forward is a presentation on the Transportation Improvement Program, which is the TIP update, and presenting would be Craig Lubecki.
Thank you. And this is a bit of a catch-up on the development of the next Transportation Improvement Program, which is kind of where the dollars that we work on long-range planning actually go out into the world to actual physical projects. We are working on developing that. We had a presentation of the technical committee as well as a workshop on the application process with the local partners following that early in the month on January 14th. And we'll just kind of real briefly talk a little bit about that, some updates on the dates, where we are on funding that's projected to be available to fiscally constrained projects in that. We have some minor adjustments and some consideration of some programming policies that we want to adjust within the TIP, and then a chance for discussion and any questions that you may have about that moving forward. So real quickly, the draft schedule, and this is fairly typical of what we see. We kind of kick it off in the beginning of year. It runs for about one full calendar year from that kickoff to when the TIP is functionally operational and funds from that programming are available. So targeting that January 2026 for a final approval. The draft Transportation Improvement Program typically adopted in either September or October. We do have it represented as October of this year on this slide. The project call, again, opened a week ago Friday, January 17th. Applications are open for about another month through the end of February. The projected revenue that's available, and this is kind of all available, both for projects that are within there that would roll over, as well as any new projects and cost increases for the program. When we're looking at the funding that this board has authority to program, we're looking at that LSTBG program, the SCBG Transportation Alternatives Program, Carbon Reduction Program, and then we are also having a conversation with the TDOT CMAQ office to be able to gather projects that may be able to utilize CMAQ PM 2.5 funds here in the region. We're not making a projection of those revenue because that's going to be in consultation with that office. So that's kind of where we are. But you do see the dollars, $126.3 million on the SCBG side, TAP program just under $12 million, carbon reduction a little over $9 million. And those are the federal figures, so does not include any local match that would be included in those programs. Project applications, again, there's a rollover form that's rather simplified for projects that are existing within the TIP that you're just moving forward into the program, which will represent certainly the lion's share of the projects that we would see in that. There's a little more detailed application for new projects that will be moving forward. Those projects must be included in the Mobility Plan 2050 and would follow that scoring criteria there. And again, the reminder that the applications are due at the end of February. I will pause for a moment on that before we talk a little bit about those policy adjustments. If there are any questions so far, and if not, we can kind of jump into policy discussion. If there are none. So there are a series of kind of programming principles and policies that are documented in the TIP. And each time that we develop the new TIP, it gives us an opportunity to kind of adjust those or make some considerations to any tweaks that may be done. The delayed project policy is kind of a carrot and stick approach that we hopefully don't use the stick, but certainly projects can kind of linger in the development process, and we want to continue to move them forward because the project that gets out in the world sooner is cheaper than one that gets out in the world later. In the past, we have said that there's a 1-year grace period from the programming time out until you get the year that is programmed and 1 additional year, and then would be subject to consideration of action from this board up to and including the removal of those funds, if that is the will of this board. As a general rule, or not as a general rule, as a rule, we have not applied that delayed project policy to any projects at this point. And in the past, we have said that we would be providing updates on those quarterly on a basis. We haven't, in the past, that was aligned with the quarterly meetings that we had with TDOT and the local sponsors in order to provide that update. We have moved that process to twice annually and works very well. We have TDOT on board with those meetings now rather than kind of having me play telephone between TDOT and the local sponsors. That's been well received, I think, by both sides of that. And we'd like to essentially revise the delayed project policy to indicate that we would provide an update twice annually kind of coming out of that and try to be a little bit more robust in what that reporting is, just for transparency on where all the projects are. So that's a suggested change there. That was supported by the technical committee. If there are any questions about that, if that seems like a reasonable approach, that's the method that we're going to proceed with. If there are none, the other very small update, you may recall that there was quite a bit of discussion on the cost overrun and funding contingency reserve policy that we had. Last cycle was the second iteration of having that cost overrun policy, and we know that we're certainly coming through a period of time when we've had quite a bit of inflation, putting pressure on projects and budgets here in the region. We had initially had that dollar figure set up. The first iteration actually was 5% of funding that we held back. With the last iteration of the TIP, we had a broader discussion about wanting to increase that. We were looking at a 10% cost overrun, and we ultimately could not constrain that figure within the budget. So we kind of dropped back to what is the closest to that figure that we could constrain, and we held back 9% of kind of all of the TPO revenue within the region. The only change that we're suggesting with this time, keeping the way cost overruns are approved by the technical committee for projects that do increase in excess of 25% of the project cost, or increase TPO federal funds in advance of $500,000. That all remains the same. The only thing that we're really changing or suggesting a change is to increase that policy reserve, just a slight tweak to get that back up to the 10% that really was kind of the goal last time. That and everything else kind of stays the same with that. So essentially, we're going to hold back 10% of the programmed revenue when we set up the fiscal constraint in this TIP, so it just increases that a little bit more. If you may recall, the total revenue on the LSTBG side, our biggest pot was $126 million. So essentially, we'll reserve $12.6 million of that fund that would be there for the reserve revenue. When we had it at 9%, that number was just about $10 million. That's the existing program, I'm sorry. That is 9%. The cost overruns that we have right now are running at 5.6% across 5 project overruns within the program, about $6.1 million. I know we're having some conversations with some additional ones that are probably going to put us in that number and working on adjusting some figures. So we feel like it makes sense to bump that reserve figure up just slightly for this next cycle. That was a lot of numbers. I'll pause for a moment if there's any questions. I have a quick question. Sure.
Sorry. So is there ever a situation where you don't have cost overruns? And I'm sure it's no, but if it is, what happens to that money? Does it sit back in the pot and do we focus on another project at that time, or?
Yeah, if we did have that wonderful world in which there were no overruns, that money would be available kind of right in this time period when we are transitioning to a new TIP. Those dollars would be, that rollover funding that we would have a slightly more available, and we kind of reconsider that in the next cycle and would be able to either, in this case, if there are no overruns, we'd be to entertain additional new projects in the next cycle.
So what account is that? Those are obviously sitting in a bank account. What's the interest rate that we're drawing off of that? No.
Those are federal funds that are
sorry.
held at TDOT, so these funds are reimbursed. I do not have a bank account for sure. Yeah, certainly I do as well. Yeah, these are federal reimbursement dollars that come back when our local sponsors have projects, so, yeah. New projects policy, essentially, really no changes to that, and that we generally try to bring new projects in with the project call, unless there are extraordinary circumstances that kind of come up. This really kind of speaks to that. Project rollover policy, again, no changes here, and this is that existing projects kind of are the priority when we are entertaining, trying to fiscally constrain the existing budget within the TIP. New rollover projects, existing projects are given priority for funding before any new projects. And again, that's a conversation with this board when we're having that. The project call that we have out right now, I'm sure we will get a request for more funding needs than we actually have funding to give out, and that is a conversation with all of the partners and ultimately this body on what that package of funding projects looks like in the next cycle. One proposed new policy, and this is not so much a TPO policy as acknowledging a policy, and you may recall this has been before the board, I think at least once in conversation, the CMAQ programming, TDOT has sent something out to all of the sponsors and are asking, in order to help them manage the CMAQ program funding, going forward, they are requesting that for CMAQ projects, only NEPA and design phases are programmed when a project is ultimately put into the TIP, and that the right-of-way phase and construction phase are programmed in, because again, recall that both the individual TIPs as well as the statewide STIP, which is a roll-up of all of those TIPs throughout the state, has to be fiscally constrained to the CMAQ program. So not programming right-of-way and construction phases allows them greater flexibility in order to get those dollars out in the given fiscal year rather than carrying those funds forward, which is the priority for the state. This relates to that August redistribution discussion that we had, that the state was very successful in applying for additional obligation authority statewide here last fall. So this is basically just kind of acknowledging that policy that CMAQ projects, which are directed again through the TDOT Air Quality Office, will only be programmed for NEPA and design until such time that right-of-way and construction phases are closer to being ready to move forward. If there are no questions about that, that is kind of open floor for any other questions that you have. There will be more conversations about this as we roll through the project application. We'll be looking at the projects that we get in and have some decisions about how to fiscally constrain the program.
I do have a question, please, Craig. So I think it was Monday, President Trump signed an executive order to pause all federal grants and loans. And then I think the next day, a federal judge issued an injunction. And so it's in a state of limbo. What kind of impact will that have? Or do you think that'll have on the funding here?
It is too early to tell. You know, that's kind of the default position. The planning assumptions that we have at this point moving forward as we lay out the program, we operate with the assumption that funding in these future years will look somewhat similar to the funding that is currently programmed through these are congressionally approved federal transportation bill. Anytime that you're in that transition, you know, we have fiscal 25 and 26 is within the existing IIJA bipartisan infrastructure law. There will be a new federal transportation bill at some point coming forward, but you know, we kind of go on the baseline of what is projected right now, and obviously the logistics of these pause and reviews is well above my pay grade at this point.
Yeah, I will just add, I was going to cover this under other business. You know, we're trying to track this, but it's literally changing hour by hour. As soon as we're like, maybe we should send this out, something else comes in that totally changes it. So if we get anything where it's, you know, substantial information, we will let you know. And I think Matt wants to add.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, I was prepared for this. So I knew this was going to come. Obviously, this is something that's on everybody's mind. I did have a conversation with Sean Santaya yesterday with Federal Highway to ask about if there's any kind of official statement that they would like to release as a way to reassure people of what these executive orders are actually doing. Although he would not commit it to paper, he did say that his understanding is that formula programs are fine. They should be moving forward just like they are, business as usual, and that includes, you know, larger programs like the STBG, National Highway Performance. A lot of the funds that the NPOs utilized in their day-to-day business. The discretionary stuff is where I think it's a little more cautious and where pause should happen until further notice. But like you said, Doug, it's is fluid. Something changes all the time, but that's what we have at this point as to what to go by.
And to follow up on your point, the dollars that we are looking at here are within the formula programs that Matt references. So those are, until further notice, we would assume that those will continue as we would operate as our normal business practices.
Explain discretionary.
So it's not a formula program. It is money that is competitively awarded.
So Safe Streets for All,
Correct.
competitive.
That is
Sa-
something.
But it is a safety project. It's not like, it's pretty nonpartisan type thing, so.
Right. Yeah, as far as I know, again, it is based on the funding allocations. And if it's not allocated by a formula, then that is what is considered discretionary. And I think that's where, as far as we know, we've never been given any type of particular discretionary grant that has been, identified. So we don't know exactly where this is going to go at this point.
Thank you.
Well, I would just ask you all to keep us posted from what you hear from our federal partners, because this organization is heavily dependent on federal funds, and some of those are formula and some of those are discretionary. Safe Streets for All is a good example. The city and the county and many other municipalities have received safety grants to make our roadways safer, and we hope that those are preserved. So we'll certainly be, sharing any communications that and concerns we have with our members of Congress, because I think they've all been very supportive of the work of this organization and discretionary and formula grants. So just keep us posted and we'll do the same.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. And this touches way more than just transportation. So you may have lobbyists or staff, you may get word. I would ask y'all pass it down to us too. We'll pass what we hear. And so it's right now, like we said, things are just changing so fast. I know we also are parts of different associations, transit associations, AMPO, and they're sending out regular emails about what they're hearing, as a lot of them are headquartered in DC and stuff. So we'll do our best to keep y'all up to date, but it's kind of crazy right this second.
Any other questions on this particular issue? And sorry if I got us out of line there, but anybody else? Okay. Craig, you going to move on to the review of the annual listing of obligated projects for FY 2024?
Sure enough. So we just looked forward into what's coming down the road. This is actually looking backwards to what happened in fiscal '24. This is an annual report that we see, one of the requirements. And we always kind of look back, and fiscal year 2024, this chart actually shows kind of that trailing line. The blue line on the top is what is programmed in the given fiscal year, and the green line is what has been obligated in those years. You'll see kind of an unusual trend here in these last 2 years. We've actually obligated more than what has been programmed, and kind of some various reasons for that. But it's a little bit unlikely or unusual because it hadn't happened if you go back to the trailing prior 8 years represented on that graph. We had $124.5 million that were programmed to 33 projects and groupings in the current TIP. And again, that's the blue line. Obligations totaled $178.6 million to 53 project and groupings from both the current as well as previous TIPs that were being still had funds obligated on them. Again, this was the second time that we had obligations in excess of programming. The programming authority, which is kind of the source of those funds. Typically, what you see is TDOT is substantially the largest obligation source on this chart. A little, again, unusual this year in that TPO funds actually are well up there, kind of in equity with the TDOT programming, and that is largely in response to, you may recall, the funding swap scenario that TDOT was here talking to us about last summer, and again, putting the state in a position to be able to successfully compete for additional obligation authority in the fall. That large TPO obligation, you'll see $80 million there. We had about $65 million of that were obligated to TDOT projects that were TPO revenue. And there is an agreement that has been signed by the board and TDOT that those funds can be paid back to TPO eligible STBG programs, because essentially from the feds it is the same pot essentially. So it's the same type of funding with the same types of eligibility. So it's a little bit of just a interesting scenario that this year TDOT and TPO funds were roughly in equity. We had some FTA direct funds that you see there, $2 million again for that total of 178.6. When you look at obligations by funding source, far and away, federal highway is the great majority of those. That largest one, NHPP program, as well as the LSTBG program, rather unusual this year because of that $65 million that was obligated to the two TDOT projects, and just a variety of other things as you go down that list. By project type, state routes, far and away the largest source, $94 million on state routes. Moving down, we've got interstate projects. Again, they're expensive, so not unusual that they're typically high on this list. Local routes, ITS, transit projects, bike and pedestrian projects specifically. I will point out that sometimes bike and pedestrian might be if that is something very specifically that, but often some of our local route projects more often have a bike and pedestrian component in them as well. TPO managed funds, these are again the funds that are kind of managed by this board and the TPO staff. Highway HIP, which is kind of an earmark obligation. We had most of that program. We've got a little bit remaining, 77% of that was obligated. LSTBG as well as LSTBG flex funds. You see a significant dollar figure there, kind of reiterating that a significant portion of that was the dollars that were obligated to those two state facilities. LSTBG TAP obligations, pretty small obligation there, and that's just a result of projects that were not ready to move forward to the next phase, and that is something that we continue to monitor and try to encourage our partners to get those dollars out the door. A CRP, Carbon Reduction Program, relatively new program. We're getting close to obligating funds for those sorts of dollars, but they've kind of been getting stood up. Didn't happen to have any obligated this fiscal year. Real quickly, we'll take a look. Here's that rollover scenario and kind of where we are. We had $70 million of revenue. We had about $53.9 million that rolled over into the year. Annual allocation is $13 million. The programming in the year, 31.9, and then when you move forward, what you're looking at is about $35 million that would roll forward into fiscal 2025. We have $27 million roughly programmed. And again, these are not necessarily funds that have already been obligated. They're just, that's where they're lined up for being programmed in the book with the intention to obligate them in that fiscal year. And if they do not, then they do roll forward into the subsequent fiscal year. Similar TAP program, much smaller dollar figures that you see here, but kind of the same chart. $4.9 million in revenue. That annual allocation on that program is about 1.6. We carried 3.4 into the year. We actually did have that rollover amount program this year, with the rollover into fiscal 25 being the 1.6. And again, we have a 2.6 program, but recall that we would have the prior year's, fiscal 26 or fiscal 25 revenue coming in there as well, so that can be constrained. Carbon reduction program, very similar size program. The annual allocations are actually within, $100,000 of each other. Annual allocation 1.6, representing that revenue. Again, we haven't been able to obligate much of that since it's a new program, so we carried a little bit more into the program. And again, had 2.6 programmed, and there's the rollover figure. Lots of numbers. You may or may not have questions, but the current and previous reports are available on the website. And again, we will continue to monitor that contingency reserve and provide updates on cost overruns as those come up from our local sponsors. And that is all I have. If you have any questions.
Seeing none, thank you, Craig.
Thank you very much.
Mike, would you like to go over the Mobility Plan 2050 updates, please?
That shocked me here. All right. Yes, just another quick update on the Mobility Plan 2050 process, which I've been coming to each of your meetings for the last several months. This is one of the core products of the TPOe that we have to update on a 4-year cycle. This has been under development for a little over a year now, and we are heading into the home stretch here towards adoption coming up in April, hopefully. So quick update of where we're at right now, and we've probably presented this type of information before, but focusing on the projects in the mobility plan, and of course, as it takes a long time to develop a project from start to finish, what ends up happening is when we update the plan every 4 years, we have a lot of projects that just continue and have to be rolled over into the new plan. So in fact, out of like 160 projects that will be going in possibly into the 2050 plan, 120 or so of those are from the previous plan. There were roughly 40 new projects added. That's the breakdown by category. These are the formula funds that are geared towards roadway projects, but you do see a fair number of other types of projects in there as well, bike ped, ITS, and some studies. We do have a GIS online interactive map. That's a screenshot there. If anybody's interested, you can go online and take a look at these and in your jurisdiction. We can send that link out. So right now we're heavy in the process of the project selection. The mobility plan has to be fiscally constrained, just like the TIP, and the TIP has to be consistent with mobility plan. So what we did a few weeks ago, we were working closely with your technical committee staff from your jurisdictions, sent them each a project list of just their projects, asking them to double check everything is correct, the names, termini, and all of that. And what we did at the staff level is we have to program these in by fiscal constraint over the time frame out to 2050 into out years, and roughly in 5-year increments there. And we do that by funding eligibility of each, where the project might fit with eligible type of funding, and make that all work in a big spreadsheet. And so then we send that out to folks to review to make sure we have your priorities in the right years. Of course, a lot of that is based on what's already under development. Projects that are in the current TIP are going to get preference and be slotted in the appropriate years. That's our first kind of test there. And then other rollover projects kind of next. And then we did score each project. We've talked about this, and you all helped us rank these goals and assign points to each of those categories. And our consultant did an analytical process using GIS primarily to overlay the projects and kind of see how they meet these criteria. There's no perfect method of quantifying project scores, and you have all kinds of different projects. So really, this is not the end all. The score of the project is not really the main factor in determining project selection, but it's kind of used, to help us evaluate ones that might be close and that kind of thing. So we do have a draft list that meets fiscal constraint, but we are working, and we've already met with several jurisdictions to go over these and make sure things are in the right place again. And so we do have flexibility to shift projects around. So we're still working through that. Coming up here, basically toward the end of the month, though, is when we've asked. So the end of this week, essentially, is when we're asking folks to give us feedback on that. We've already met with several folks. The mobility plan is currently in the TDOT 30-day review period. And then following that, there will be a concurrent FHWA and public review period during the month of March. And then, like I said, adoption is scheduled for April. So that's all I had on that one. Are there any questions? Okay.
Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the household travel survey update.
All right, so this item is one we just want to give you a heads up about, a major study a survey that's going to be rolling out in the region. And some quick background is the household travel survey gives us the most comprehensive data regarding people's travel to understand why people are making trips and analyze that, and this feeds into our models and so forth. And travel behavior changes over time, so it's important to do these every so often. This is the background. Originally, 1962, there was one done with almost 8,000 households, which actually apparently conducted in-home interviews for these, if you can imagine that. took a long time, and we were getting feedback from FHWA that we need to update our study. It came up every time in our reviews and actually became, I think, a corrective action that we do one of these. So we did one in year 2000 with 1,700 households in Knox and Blount counties. And then 2008, we updated that because we expanded our travel model area for non-attainment air quality status. So we did those 8 counties shown on the screen here with another 1,400 households. But if you think about since 2008, there have been a lot of changes, obviously. Smartphones were just coming out. There were no Uber Lyfts, I don't think, back then. And online shopping, like I get a package from Amazon about every other day, it seems like. I didn't order them, but they're coming to our house. So a lot of those changes. And then obviously the big one more recently is a lot of work from home aspects going on. So we want to capture that information. So this is a very comprehensive and intensive survey that we ask people to fill out. We're basically asking them to track all of their trips during a typical day. So that could consist of, taking someone to school and then going to maybe grab coffee and then heading to work. And while you're at work, you might go out to lunch. And that could be a walking trip where you're on a car or these others. So all that information, and it's important to not leave out any trips that you make. And so we ask all sorts of information about the household and all the members, about their socioeconomic information. And then what that leads to is we can develop these mathematical relationships of things like trip rate versus household income. You can see by this chart, as household income increases, generally more trips are made by that household. Obviously, another big factor is life cycle of the household, households with children versus retired households, the amount of trips that they take. So we can make all these mathematical relationships work and then apply these with a statistically valid sample into our travel demand model all across the region. So for this survey, we did partner with other MPOs throughout the state and through the MPO statewide association. So as it ended up, 8 of the 11 MPOs are participating in this, which helps us kind of leverage, expertise and also kind of orders of scale for cost factors and so forth. So we have a single consultant on board. Well, it's a team, WSP and Westat. We've already developed kind of a brand for it called My Travels Count. And so statewide, we're looking at 10,500 households. And the way that breaks down in our area, we work with the Lakeway MPO in Morristown because we have one single travel model. So we're trying to get 3,000 households for those 8 counties that we cover. So in order to get people to actually participate in this survey, it's very challenging these days, as you can imagine. There's actually going to be over 650,000 invitations mailed out. And then from that, they hope to recruit around 20,000 households. As you guys probably know, and I see if I get a survey in the mail, it's just very hard for me to have the time to do that. And like I said, this survey is quite intensive in terms of what we're asking people to provide. So it's a challenge to get this many recruited. And we do have a website where everything is tracked. There will be incentives for this. Basically, it's really not possible to get your goal of recruitment without offering some monetary incentive. So the way this works is you get, I think, $5 per person in the household that will do the survey, and you can get an additional $5 if you do their app that you download. So a household of 4 could get up to $40 to participate in this, and they have to complete the whole thing. You get your own dashboard. You can track all of your information here online. So it's all set up to be fairly straightforward from that point. So a quick summary of all that. This is kicking off hopefully sometime in mid-February, I think is the latest. So we'll be sending out press releases and information, and where we really need your all's help because it's very likely someone may call your offices or folks and say, hey, I got this survey. Is this really legitimate? And so we want to stress to people that it is legitimate and the privacy is of utmost concern with, keeping privacy on this. So any help you guys can provide us with that would be appreciated. Of course, we'll be sharing summaries along the way, and when the report is done, we'll have all that wealth of information that we'll use. And this will feed into directly towards a development of a new travel demand model that we will work primarily with the technical committee group on scoping that out and where we want that direction to head. So I think that's all I have on this item too. So
I have a question.
any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to know what we've hired or partnered with other MPOs for an outside survey
Right.
consultant to do this. Do you know what measures they're taking to make sure the sample includes people who take the bus and,
Yes.
maybe only have one car and, or whatever, just to,
Yeah.
particularly our lower income families may be less likely to say yes to conducting the
Right.
survey? I mean, that happens with census surveys. I know there's a disparate capacity or willingness to maybe participate in surveys like this. So how are
Yes.
they dealing with that?
Definitely a good point. Yeah, and it's always a struggle to get some of the demographic segments to participate in these. So targeted efforts are made to get those, and we do have sort of quotas and we like think of cells of what our overall region looks like, and then kind of stratify the response rate to fit that, so we have kind of an equal distribution. At the end of the day, you're never going to get a perfect representation of that, so there will be some weighting added, most likely, to the final result. You don't use just the raw numbers that come out. But yeah, you're right that we want to make sure we do capture those harder to reach types of households. So that would be part of this. And it is included in the scope of the contract.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mike.
All right.
Up next are our partners from TDOT and the Federal Highway Administration for updates, please.
I'll go through a couple updates real quick. Y'all have a packet here in front of you, so I'll put most of this stuff in writing for you, so I don't have to cover everything. A couple of the highlights on this one, our county profile tool is updated. So if you all are pointing any kind of data, that's maintained by the planning division. That information has been updated, ready to go. You all are always interested in our list. So we have a 3-year paving list that comes out every year. We have our bridge list and our safety list. Those are all going to be basically released at the same time. Right now, 2 of them come out together, and this researching list comes out a little bit different. We're trying to streamline that so we have everything out and ready at the same time, so we can do single presentations and get that information out to you as well. Past that, you're looking at the federal highway updates. Do you have anything else TDOT wise?
Yeah, a couple other things. We are actually starting to kick off our statewide long-range transportation plan. Today is the date, or yesterday was the date where we were supposed to receive a executed contract from the selected consultant. So you will be hearing a little bit more from us on a statewide perspective of what we're looking at for a 20-year horizon, taking into account what you all have done with yours and complementing that with what we have. We have a number of ideas of how we'd like to approach this, and I'll bring that up later on when we have more information and you can meet our consultants. The 2025 is going to be a busy year for us when it comes to some of the core products that are due. As Craig had mentioned, the TIP is one of those documents that's done. We also have to update our Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP, which I know you've been very familiar with. We are going to be providing a expectations memo out here in the next few days to make sure that we're all on the same page of what we're looking for, what the feds are looking for, and what also you plan to do with your consolidated planning grant dollars. One other thing, there is a major study that is being performed here in the area, the 4075 study. I think you've all heard about that. We are working with Mike to put together a presentation for next month at both the TC and the executive board to give you an in-depth, well, at that point, whatever depth we're at, to just let you see where we're headed and what that project scope is and allow for some input from you all for that. And I think that is it from the TDOT side. So go ahead, Troy, with the Federal Highway.
As far as the federal highway updates, they're in here. And the biggest parts on that is, they changed one of the names, one of the programs, Raise Now Build. And then there's some deadlines in there. One's the end of the week as far as for the build program. The other one is already out, but there are links included with some of these that we've sent to the staff. So if y'all are interested in that, we can get, staff can get those links out to you so you can actually click on them and go and dig in some of that information.
All right, are there any questions? Okay, thank you all very much. So we're on to other business. Doug, did you have anything? Like I said, I kind of.
No, you can see the next dates for the technical committee and executive board, and in your packet is a list of all of the meeting dates. This was a weird month. We had the meeting on the 5th week, but I checked everything. We're back to the 4th Wednesday except for November and December, so we're back on a regular meeting schedule. So that's all I had.
Does anyone else have any other business they'd like to discuss? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment, where members of the public may address the executive board with a 5-minute time limit for each person. Is there anyone signed up or anyone here for that? Okay. Seeing none, without objection, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so very much for being here today.